Good afternoon. This is an interview of June the 3rd, 2014 of Alan Baker for the Missouri Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress American Folk Life Center. We are in St. Louis County, Missouri at a conference room provided by the Enterprise Bank, by the courtesy of Enterprise Bank Corp. I am Carl Sherman. With me today are Roger Fredrickson as the videographer, Janet Quinca in charge of the log, and Larry Balsamo is an observer. Alan Baker is a veteran of the United States Army and retired as a Spec 5. First, Alan, thank you for being with us today. Can you please spell your name and tell us your date of birth?
It's Alan, A-L-A-N-J period Baker, B-A-K-E-R, date of birth 7/23/42.
Very good. Can you start by telling me, I'm sorry, what did your father do?
My father ran a neighborhood grocery store in the city of St. Louis.
You have any siblings? I know the answer to this.
I have a brother, Larry, that's L-A-R-Y, Baker.
Okay. What did your mother do?
My mother worked in the mailroom of an insurance company, and their office was in Clayton, Missouri. Her maiden name was Z-L-E-P-P-E-R.
Okay, and her maiden name is
Schiller, Michelle Schiller hyphen Baker.
Okay. You were married when?
I was married 24 years ago on December 3rd. Who's good at math here? Take me back 24 years. It would have been December 3rd, 24 years ago.
80.
No, 90.
Okay.
You've got it.
And you have children?
I have children.
You have a daughter, I know.
I have two daughters, Carol, who is it's Carol Lenhoff Bell. She is a teacher in the Clayton School District. And my youngest daughter is Mara Baker, and she is right now volunteering in a program for children in Juneau, Alaska.
Wow, you got an interesting place to visit.
We have visited. It was interesting. It was challenging at times, but very rewarding. It was a nice place to be.
Neat. Okay, where'd you go to elementary and high school?
I started elementary at Laclede School in North St. Louis, transferred in third grade to Jackson Park Grade School in University City, Missouri, went to Hanley Junior High School in University City, Missouri, and graduated from University City High School.
What were your favorite subjects while you were in school?
Other than physical education, I tended to like English, social studies, always very difficult, and it must be in the DNA because I think I've passed that on to my children.
You need the services of my wife. Anyway.
There you are.
Okay. Did you work while you were in school?
I worked several jobs. Now we're talking about high school.
Yeah.
High school, I worked at a retail business called Government Employees Mart on Page Avenue, and I stocked shelves. So that was the job that I worked in high school. Yes, I did.
What'd you spend? I'm sure they paid unbelievably well. And how'd you spend all that money?
The money was thrown into a common pot at home, and that money was thereafter spent on me.
Right. On whatever you in the law school.
Washington U, law school, whatever the expenses were in the household, there was a common pot. Everybody pitched in.
Very good. Good story. Well, how did it come about that you went in the service? I think I know you were drafted.
I was drafted near the end of my last year of law school. I received a deferment so that I could graduate, and then shortly after graduation, the deferment was over, and I was inducted into the Army.
Where was that?
It was in 1968. July of 1968.
That's when you were entered or when you were drafted?
And it was, I think, July of 69, June or July of 69 is when I came down on what they called in those days a levy. And the word levy, if you were in the armed forces at that time, was not a word you wanted to hear if your name was on a levy. When the GIs When they used the term, I came down on a levee, that meant you were going to Vietnam.
Let's back up for a minute.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about basic training. How was that experience?
Basic training was physically challenging, but having said that, it was also interesting. I was the oldest person in my unit. I was 26 years old, and most of the other guys were 18, 19, 20, maybe 21. So I was the oldest one in my basic training unit.
Any restrictions or rules that you found hard to deal with?
In basic training? None.
Good.
None. I came out with an MOS of 11 Delta 20, which was a legal clerk. It made too much sense for the Army, but wouldn't you know, I guess on that one, maybe the computer worked properly. I don't know.
But you didn't wind up doing that.
I did and I didn't. When you say wind up, you mean my service in Vietnam?
Yeah.
I was a legal clerk in Vietnam, but those duties were mixed. Nobody there, to my knowledge, did only what their MOS required. The nature of that war was that everybody was a soldier, bunker guard at night, regardless of what your MOS was. If rockets and mortars came into the base at night, they were extremely non-discriminatory. They didn't ask what your MOS was. They hit and they exploded.
Yeah. In basic training, let's go back there for a minute.
Yes.
People didn't make it.
Some people, for whatever reason, had adjustment problems and were chronic AWOLs. They would disappear, and a few of those I saw at the beginning of basic training, but they weren't there at the end. Some of the inductees had physical challenges, which made it extremely difficult, if not impossible, for them to pass the military exercises and tests. So some people did have difficulty with what was required in basic training.
A couple questions about that. Do you think that your training was adequate for what you wound up doing in Vietnam? And also, any additional training you think you could have used?
I don't think that it was adequate for what I experienced in Vietnam. The basic training was very rudimentary. How to take a weapon apart, put it back together, how to clean a weapon, a few days on a firing range. None of that was preparation for not only being attacked, but for a company commander coming to you in Vietnam and saying, fellas, you're going out on an ambush tonight, when no one in the unit had ever had training on how to pull an ambush. So basic training certainly did not cover that. Village sweeps, no training on what we were to look for on a village sweep until we got to Vietnam, and that you learned by experience. So for what I experienced in Vietnam, the actual basic training didn't prepare me. Having said that, let me be clear. What did prepare me in basic training for what I experienced in Vietnam was discipline, taking orders, questioning no orders that were given. In that regard, basic training was excellent.
So where was your first station in Vietnam? Where were you first located at?
For the first week, there was the 101st Airborne Division, and that was the division to which I was assigned when I got to Vietnam.
I didn't interrupt you. When you first told me that when I was talking to you, knowing Alan for most of my life, I couldn't believe that you were a paratrooper. That's really shattered my image.
Put the image back together. I was not a paratrooper. I will digress for a moment if you don't mind. To be assigned to the 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam when I was there, you did not have to be what they called jump qualified. And the reason for that was the nature of the war. They didn't drop troops out of airplanes in Vietnam. The war didn't lend itself to that because there were no enemy lines to drop line behind. In addition, they would have been shot out of the air as they jumped. So the bottom line is you did not have to be jump qualified. I was not jump qualified. Having said that, may I tell an anecdote?
Please do.
When I got to Vietnam and we disembarked from the airplane, and all they called the new troops in country gathered on sheets of metal. There must have been a couple of hundreds of us. And as we stood there with our packs and our duffel bags, there was a sergeant who was up in front with a microphone, and he would yell out names, rank, and to which unit you were being assigned. When he yelled out Specialist 3rd Class Alan J. Baker, 101st Airborne Division, the first thing I said was, oh my God. So I took my gear, and around the perimeter of all of these troops, I got fairly close to the sergeant who was doing or reading the assignments. And after a few minutes, he caught my eye, and he said, "Soldier, you listen to me. The Army doesn't make typographical errors. Get your blank and get over with the screaming egot.
So
Welcome to Vietnam."
So you first, after the reception center, or whatever they call
It
it,
was about a week. They called it search training. It was a form of in-country training, refreshers on how to handle grenades, target practice, brief things on very brief the village sweeps, ambushes, but they scratched the surface. Having said that, there was a little bit of practical training not scheduled while we were there in the search training at Benoit Air Base. Wouldn't you know, in those 5 days, we experienced about 3 rocket and mortar attacks.
Wow.
So we, not scheduled, but we learned how to duck and to crawl and to dive to the ground. And that was just within the
instead of
first...
practice, you got the real, you got real training.
We got the real stuff.
Wow.
Who got the real stuff?
So were you there most of your time, or you were
No,
all over?
within 7 days, I was flown up to Camp Eagle, which was in what they called Northern I Corps. It was in Thu Thanh province, which was one of the northern provinces in South Vietnam. Camp Eagle, it was about, if I recall, 6 miles south, maybe west of the old imperial capital of Hue, HU, and about 20 kilometers for what the GIs in Vietnam referred to as the county line, which was the demilitarized zone between South and North Vietnam. And that's where I spent the rest of my time. A normal day.
Maybe I said that wrong, but what were your basic duties there?
My basic duty was to, during the day, it was either record testimony from court-martial proceedings, do village sweeps, which means going out on a patrol with rifles through villages, looking for signs of enemy activity. But it was generally doing my MOS position, which was as a legal clerk, or doing village sweeps.
Wow. How was the morale of people in all the soldiers around you?
Not good. I was 27 when I went there.
Yeah, you were an old man.
I was an old man. I had the good fortune to have been able to go to Washington University and receive an undergraduate degree, and Washington University Law School to receive a law degree. And I think I was astute enough to know, number one, nobody could give me a reason for being there. And it's been about 44 years since I came home, and to this date, no one has been able to give me a reason for being there. Might have been different from my reasons. Many of them tended to be African American or even Caucasian, who never had the benefit of being able to go to higher education, and they were by far and away the classes who made up the bulk of the soldiers there, and they came with a certain anger, and if I might add, justified anger and bitterness, So there were a number of reasons why the morale was low. I can only speculate as to what caused the low morale on the others. There was an interesting story. There was a lieutenant colonel who was attached to our unit. I think it was Colonel Young. I don't recall his first name. And he was a bright, intelligent human being. He had been assigned to NATO before he came to us. Now, mind you, this is a career officer, well seasoned in the military. And I remember one day him saying to me, Baker, we don't have any business being here. And that came from a lieutenant colonel.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect that from him.
You would not, and you would never expect him to say that to an enlisted man? I wasn't an officer. They weren't even supposed to speak directly to me. Well, he only confirmed what I knew. We had no business being.
Interesting. You say 44 years later,
No one had been able to give me a reason why
you were obviously under a lot of stress. What did you do to relieve the stress?
in Vietnam.
Besides drinking Budweiser, which is
Yeah.
a standard answer we usually get.
I didn't drink Budweiser. I didn't drink at all. Some guys did, but I wanted to make sure I was alert because you never knew.
Well, how difficult was it to stay in touch with your family back home? In those days, it was only mail only, and no email.
No emails, sending letters. That was doable. It worked.
Even the phone was not active.
No.
It was not available.
No.
Okay. When you were over there, did you have any R&R time? Did you get to go anywhere else?
1 week, I went to Hong Kong.
That's good. Then you had to go back to reality.
Then I went back to my reality.
Okay. Any other interesting or memorable experiences that stick out that you want to share with us?
Well, I can talk about the night that I got hit in a rocket attack and got my jaw split open, and I put my finger up to my finger went into my mouth. So my friend pulled me down to his lap and he called, and the medic jumped in, and I was that medic's first casualty. And he apparently in medic school had been taught to say something to a GI that he was administering to. And I was lying back, and the back of my head was in my friend's lap, and he was holding this together. And the medic began with, relax, you're in good hands, I'm an Army-trained medic, and then he couldn't remember the end of the spiel. So he cycled around, relax, you're in good hands, I'm an Army-trained medic, and he couldn't remember the end of the spiel. And when he looped around for the third time and he said the word relax, my friend who was holding me, Spencer Viner, who was from Providence, Rhode Island, he was behind me. He leaned over so that my head went down. He grabbed the medic by the top of the shirt and he screamed, Sidney, forget the blanket speech.
Just do something.
Start wrapping Bake's head. That was kind of funny when that happened. Wow. Yeah.
Laugh at the time.
I laughed. I can't use the word on this video that Spencer yelled, but you can speculate. Yes, I did laugh.
So the medic got his first on-the-job training with you.
I was his first casualty, Sidney.
Wow.
Yeah, and Sidney would go on village sweeps with us, no weapon. He was a conscientious objector, but he was there. God love him. He was there.
Wow. Good story. So how did your time was up and
Came home. Physically, I came home. Mentally, I did not come home.
you came back to where? To the Seattle or to
No.
California?
No. I came back to McCord Air Force Base in Seattle, Washington, which is attached to, at the time, what was Fort Lewis, Washington. And I think today it's been consolidated into one base. So that's where I came back. And we went through about 2 days of out processing before they took us to what they called the SeaTac airport to come home wherever home
Were you
was.
charged then, or did you, or
I had been discharged. But there's a very interesting story about what I encountered at SeaTac Airport. In order to get the free flight home, you had to be in your
uniform?
military dress uniform. And I believe it was an Eastern Airlines flight that I was in line waiting to get my ticket for. They made an announcement that that flight was going to be oversold and that many of the people standing in the line would not be able to get a ticket to go wherever they were going. And I think that the flight was from Seattle to Portland and then to St. Louis. Mind you, I hadn't seen my family in a year. I had been wounded less than a month before. And when they made that announcement, a fella came up to me when I was standing in line and he said, "Soldier, do you mind if I take your spot in line? I have a business appointment in St. Louis that I can't afford to miss." That's how we came home.
Yeah, of that war history. And you had the bigger insult.
Standing in line at the SeaTac airport.
You think he'd say the opposite. You say, "Nice, take my spot."
No, we knew better. We were dispensable. We knew we were dispensable.
Wow.
There were two wars, the war in Vietnam and the war that was going on back here. And Nobody in either place was crazy about us. That was the dilemma we had.
Yeah. Have a big party when he finally got to St. Louis?
Had no party. I had not passed the bar exam before I was drafted. And so I had to take a bar review course. I lived at home with my parents, and they both worked, as I said before. And I would study the bar material there. And then I would go have a beer and then come home. So that was my life. I didn't have much to do with my old friends. I wasn't in the same world they were in. They had started in careers. Some of them had started families. Plus, I still had buddies back in Vietnam. And so even having grown up with wonderful, wonderful people, I found myself in a different world from them. They talked about things that I couldn't relate to. And frankly,
you couldn't talk about what you did.
Absolutely not. So I came back to a different world from the world that I left. I was free falling. In addition, when your presence makes other people uncomfortable. And I could sense that when I was even with my family, and I don't fault them for this. I never faulted them for this, but nobody knew what to talk to me about. They were afraid to approach me. And in retrospect, I'm sure that a lot of my friends were in the same position. Brought me back was a law professor that I had at Washington University, David Becker. He taught property law. What a great guy at Washington U. And somehow I got involved on a softball team that was made up of lawyers and law profs and law students. And after the game, we'd go out and have an iced tea or a beer and a hamburger or whatever. But I was the only one who never participated in the conversation. I just sat. And he had to have sensed that. Bright, sensitive human being. He had to have sensed it. And I heard him mention in one conversation that even at his age, he played hockey at Shaw Park. And he was no youngster. And a friend of mine had a connection with the St. Louis Blues hockey team. And I asked him if he could get me a hockey stick. And he was Norman Rubin.
Sure. I know Norman.
And he gave me the hockey stick. And one day when I was doing my bar review work at Washington U, I went to the old law school. It was January Hall at that time. And I brought that hockey stick and I gave it to him. He was in his office and he said, "Alan, how you doing? Lawyers have a saying, you never ask a question that you don't know the answer to." He knew how I was doing before he asked me that question. And I told him how I was doing. He said something to me that turned my life around on a dime. He said, "Nobody here who hasn't been there is never going to be able to adjust to you." He said, "If you're going to have to adjust to them." And that was the piece that I had been missing.
That's great advice.
And in that conversation, he turned my life around. He gave me my life back.
Still stay in touch with him, or has he passed on?
He hasn't passed on. He's retired to Florida, but once in a while.
So you passed the bar exam?
After a couple of cracks at it, yeah.
Did you work? And I didn't know you then as well as I know you now. Did you work for a law firm or always start off by yourself?
I started off working I couldn't buy a job.
Yeah.
And that's kind of interesting. Part of our out processing, we were told that if you apply for a government job because you've been in the service in Vietnam, you'll get a preference. I applied for a few government jobs as a lawyer, and there was something on the form that you filled out. Have you ever been in the service? I truthfully answered. I didn't get the jobs, but there were guys I knew who got them who had never spent one day in
the reverse of how it's supposed to be.
Well, the reverse of what we were told. But through my aunt who worked at the courthouse, she ran into a lawyer who just needed help quickly because of a client he had taken on that was taking a lot of his time. And so he hired me. I made $100 a week, and God love him, and he was a great guy, but the $100 didn't always come every week. But that's all right. I was living at home. And he never trusted me with anything of consequence. What I did was very ministerial.
Did the groundwork.
I did grunt work. And one day he was in a bind because two judges had had enough of him, and they both told him the day after that, the secretary of the lawyer that I tried that case against called me and said, Mr. Jacobsmeyer would like to know, would you be interested in switching positions? I said, how quickly? And I think it was like on a Thursday, and she said, can you be here Saturday morning? And I was there, and I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, whatever he's paying you, I'll pay you double and you get half of what you bring in. Well, he was part of a small firm. Ultimately, myself and a few of the other lawyers in the firm had a disagreement with him. We split up.
Not uncommon.
Not uncommon. And myself and the other lawyers, until this past March,
Okay.
we were together.
You administered a few tickets for me.
Oh, I did?
Yes.
I did.
Okay.
Did I get a decent amount
Yes, you won.
for you? Well,
You won as much as I didn't get points, I guess. All right, it's not anything, but
you won.
you handle. I'm a former client of yours.
All right. It was the price right.
Many moons ago. It was right. I had no
Price
complaints.
was $6.
Okay. Anyway,
That's been it.
very good. Do you keep in touch with people you served with in Vietnam?
One. Spencer Viner, the fellow who held my jaw together. And if you bear with me,
You involved in any veterans organizations?
I am not.
D-I-N-E-R.
Diner. He's now living in Phoenix.
That's a good place to visit.
Spencer Viner gave me this 101st Airborne Division coin. I am never without this coin.
All right, now lower that onto your, take your wallet away from there. Okay, put that, stand it up.
On the right.
That's it.
Wow.
Explain that again now. What is that?
This is a 101st Airborne Division coin. In the military, it is considered an honor to be given a coin that represents some unit or some division by another member of the military. And this was given to me by Spencer Viner, who was the fellow who held my jaw together in the bunker when I was wounded. I'm never without this coin.
Neat story. Ever going back to places you trained or I'm sure you have no desire to go back to Vietnam to visit, or do you?
I couldn't go back to to places where I trained. Shall I still hold the coin? Do you?
Oh, I've got it.
Oh, you've got it. Places that I trained. Interesting that you asked that. Great one, isn't it? And sometimes, not sometimes. And when she senses that, she acts upon what she senses. And maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, she said, we're going to take a trip to Georgia. And there were other members of her side of the family who went. And the trip started out when we got to Savannah, Georgia. She had made reservations at a hotel within about 2 blocks of Hunter Army Airfield.
Excuse me, you mentioned something about your wife's relatives who had said,
Went on this trip, not who had served, who went on this trip. It was, and she made sure that I went back to that base.
So looking back, that was a good trip. That was a beneficial trip.
That it was beneficial. Yeah,
Good story.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get down to home stretch here and reflect a little bit. I think you've told us a lot, but I'm still going to answer.
You asked away.
How do you think your active military experiences affected your life, and can you give us any lifetime learnings you learned from your military?
How did it affect my life? It's certainly major's an understatement. It certainly affected what is important to me in this world and what is fluff. Material things mean nothing. Being honest means a lot. Our politicians at that time were not honest with us. And I've seen firsthand what can happen to people when their leaders are not honest with those that they serve becomes important. So it's had an enormous effect on what's been important to me in my life since I got back and what I could care less about. It as a lawyer, let me put it that way. If I have clients who are in some way affected by the government, and I think maybe the people in the government are being less than honest with my clients, I donate my time.
Good story. That's a major influence and reflection. How do you spend your time nowadays? I know you're a workaholic. I know that.
I am a workaholic.
You have any hobbies or any regular activities you like to do?
You know, I have to tell you, the 3 guys that I just ended a 40-plus years partnership with, none of us had any hobbies. None of us ever developed any outside interest. We probably were were and are the four most boring people you could ever meet in your life. All we knew was every day, and some of us on weekends, show up and go to work. We weren't vacation. We didn't take vacations. We did what made us run was going to work every day. And three of the four of us still do them. Yeah. Look, everybody has the right to do what she or he enjoys or gives them some kind of a, what do they call it, the younger people, a rush? And with me, it's when I can help somebody. A lot of times I can't, but when I can help make somebody's life easier, even if it's a little bit, nothing that makes me feel better than doing that. Nothing.
Okay. Let's play show and tell. Show and tell. The thing you brought us here. That's fabulous.
Back in third grade at Jackson.
Right. Show and tell. Right.
Okay. So let's turn it right side up. So
Good for you.
Let's see. It's not good yet either. We're going to do reflection off that glass. Turn it the other way, maybe toward you.
like this.
Yeah, try that. Okay. Yeah, it's better. Go ahead and introduce us to each one of those medals.
But behind it, well, this is the Purple Heart that I was awarded for my jaw being split open in a rocket attack. This is a patch indicating at the time my rank. There are two other patches that got lost in the shuffle. I don't know whatever happened. This is a Vietnamese campaign medal. This is an Army Commendation Medal. This is a Bronze Star. And do not be disillusioned. You'll notice there is no V device. I was not given this or awarded this because I did anything heroic. Be clear. I was awarded this because I was in a combat zone for a year. These ribbons, to this day, they gave me when I outcrossed at Fubai, and I don't know what they represent. This is a mezuzah. It has a Star of David, the 10 Commandments inside, and my dog tags. This was given to me by my mother on a chain, and she put it that stayed around my neck until I died.
Great story. Well, last chance. If any other stories you want to tell, or if not, we're pretty well through.
The other stories that I want to tell,
Do you talk to your kids about any of this?
no.
Do you think you ever will?
I don't know. If I think it's under circumstances that I think they would benefit, I would tell them. Well, those circumstances haven't arisen yet.
Well, we want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for taking the time today to share your experiences.
Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Great, good interview.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was it all.